I will never forget the sound of silverware hitting the plates that night. It was Christmas dinner, and while everyone talked about gifts and toasted the new year, I only thought about how I had managed to prepare that table with the little I had. The aroma of the turkey mixed with the candles, and in the middle of all that festive air, my daughter Lauren, my only daughter, looked at me with a coldness I had never seen in her eyes. She raised her glass, and with a smile loaded with poison, she said, "Next Christmas there will be one less mouth to feed, because this old woman will already be dead." No one said a word. The silence became so thick that even the clock seemed to stop. My grandson, only 7 years old, looked down. His father pretended to cough. I kept cutting the turkey, trying to keep the tremor in my hands from showing. I felt a tear fall, but I disguised it as a reflection from the fireplace. I forced myself to smile, to maintain my composure, even though inside me something was breaking with a noise only I could hear. My entire life I had endured hurtful words, veiled humiliations, silences more cruel than screams, but that sentence was different. It was not an impulse, nor a bad moment. It was a verdict. Lauren had spoken from contempt, from a dark corner of her soul that I myself, without knowing it, had helped build. As I chewed without tasting the food, my mind traveled to the past. I remembered the days when she was a little girl, when she slept hugging my neck and told me she would never leave me alone. I thought of the nights of fever, of the torn shoes I mended time and time again, of the times I preferred not to eat so she could have a full plate. All of that, a whole life of devotion, had been reduced to that cruel phrase, spoken in front of everyone like a macabre toast. I kept eating. I pretended it did not matter. I pretended not to hear, but inside I was burning, and as the tree lights flickered in front of me, I knew something had to change. That night, without her knowing it, she had signed the beginning of the end. I ate slowly, with a calm that was not peace, but decision. Every bite was a silent promise. No one imagined that this tired-looking old woman was preparing something. Not just any revenge, but a worthy response, cold, calculated. A lesson Lauren would never forget. My son-in-law awkwardly tried to change the subject. He talked about business accounts, the price of gas, anything that could draw attention away, but Lauren just watched me, with a half-smile, enjoying her own poison. When I finished eating, I stood up slowly, picked up my plate, and took it to the kitchen. No one stopped me. No one said a word. I washed the plate with slow, mechanical movements. The hot water burned my hands, but the pain kept me awake. I looked at my reflection in the window, the wrinkles, the gray hair, the tired eyes, and I thought about how many times I had been invisible. Invisible in my house, invisible in her life, invisible even at that table where everyone talked about me as if I were already dead. I slept little that night, not from sadness, but from clarity. When a woman reaches a certain age, she learns to be silent, not out of fear, but strategy. I knew that words were useless now, that love, if unvalued, becomes dead weight, and I was tired of being everyone's burden. At dawn, the house was completely silent. I got up before anyone else. I walked down the hallway looking at the photos on the walls. My wedding, Lauren's first birthday, the beach vacations, memories that seemed to belong to another family, not ours. I made coffee, but I did not drink. On the table, there were still leftovers from dinner. Wrinkled napkins, stained glasses, the stale smell of cold turkey, and in the middle of it all, my plate, clean, shining, waiting for me. That is when I got the idea. Not an immediate idea, but a revelation. I took that plate, held it in my hands as if it were a relic. I looked at it and understood that it would be my message, my symbol. I did not need to shout or argue or beg for love. A single gesture would be enough. I went up to my room, opened my deepest drawer, and took out a yellowish sheet, a piece of paper I had saved for years. There I would write what needed to be said, what she needed to read to understand. It would not be a farewell letter, nor one of spite, but something much more powerful, a mirror. But before we continue, I'd like to know if you've subscribed to Grandma's Diary, and if you liked the video. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. Now, let's continue. That morning when the clock struck 7, the sun began to filter through the window. I left the note folded carefully on the plate and walked to my daughter's bedroom door. Everything was silent. The hallway seemed like an endless tunnel. I placed the plate in front of her door, with the note on top, and stared at it for a few seconds. It was like leaving a part of my soul there, still, waiting to be discovered. Then I went downstairs. I grabbed my coat and left without making a sound. The morning air hit my face, but it felt like freedom. I walked aimlessly, without looking back. For the first time in many years, I did not feel guilty. I felt power, a cold calm that ran through my entire being. I knew that when Lauren woke up, she would see the plate and the note, and I knew with absolute certainty that this small act would change our lives forever. Because sometimes, mothers know how to get revenge too, not with screams, but with silences that weigh more than iron. I walked through the empty streets, while the Christmas lights still twinkled on other people's balconies. I heard laughter in the distance, the sound of a radio, a dog barking. Everything was the same, but inside me, nothing was the same anymore. That night, at that table, the mother who begged for love had died. And the woman who was going to teach her daughter what abandonment truly means had just been born. I kept walking, without looking back, with a single fixed idea. She would remember this Christmas for the rest of her life. As I walked aimlessly that morning, the memories began to fall on me like a fine, unstoppable drizzle. Every step I took seemed to return me to a different time, to the days when all I had was a little girl with big eyes and a heart full of dreams. Lauren, my little Lauren. How much did I love her? How much did I protect her? How much did I believe that love would be enough so that she would never treat me like a burden? People often say that a mother should forget the pain of childbirth, but there are pains that are never erased. The day her father died, I was 36. Lauren had just turned 6. I remember her crying, her confusion, her fear. I knelt in front of her and promised her that nothing would separate us, that I would be her strength, her home, her refuge. And so I did. I worked any job I could find. Cleaning houses, sewing, taking care of the elderly. My hands filled with cracks, my eyes with dark circles. But she always had food, school, new shoes when hers broke. I never cared about being tired. Seeing her smile was enough for me. I loved when she came home from school with drawings in her hand and said, "Look, Mom, it's you and me." In those moments I felt it was all worth it. But the years pass, and with them, the wounds you do not see begin to grow. When Lauren became a teenager, something changed. She started to be ashamed of me, of my simple clothes, my rough hands, my way of speaking. She called me old-fashioned, ignorant. I would laugh, pretending it did not hurt, but each word stabbed me like a thorn. The world offered her things I could never give her. Friends from rich families, designer clothes, parties where my presence did not fit, and little by little, my daughter drifted away. I knew I was losing her the day she told me not to come to her graduation. She said she did not want the others to see me like that. That phrase, so innocent and cruel at the same time, was like a stab wound. I stayed home, watching the sunset from the window, wearing the new dress I had sewn for the occasion. I cried all night, but at dawn I forced myself to smile. Years later, when she met her husband, I thought she would finally have a new family, a stability I could never give her. But that man filled her head with twisted ideas. He made her believe I was a burden, that she had to cut the umbilical cord once and for all. I heard him say it one night, thinking I was asleep. "Your mother clings to you because she has nothing else. If you do not pull away, you'll end up just as old and lonely as her." Those words followed me for years, like an echo that never fades. I tried not to meddle. When my grandson was born, I thought things would change. I thought that little boy would connect me to her again, that a grandmother's love would be a bridge between us. But no. Lauren visited me infrequently, and when she did, everything was tense. Any comment I made was a cause for displeasure. If I told her the boy was thin, she got offended. If I brought her food, she refused it, saying they did not eat those things anymore. Every encounter was a silent battle, a choreography of reproaches that only a mother and daughter know how to perform without words. And yet, I was still there, making her favorite dessert when she came, saving the bank statements that arrived for her at my house, paying her overdue bills without telling her. I did it out of love, or so I told myself. But deep down, I knew I also did it out of fear. fear of losing her completely, fear of becoming a ghost that no one remembers. Sometimes I wonder when exactly our bond broke. If it was that day I yelled at her that she was becoming just like her father. A proud, distant man, incapable of asking for forgiveness. Or if it was when I was not invited to her wedding. I found out from a neighbor. Imagine the pain. Knowing your only daughter is getting married and does not even receive your blessing. I spent the night embroidering a handkerchief with her name, as if that would ease anything. I put it in a drawer, and it's still there. I never gave it to her. That is why, when she told me at that Christmas dinner that I would not be alive next time, it was not just an insult, it was the perfect ending to a story that had been crumbling for years. It was as if all the times she humiliated me, all the tears I shed in silence, were concentrated in that brutal sentence. But something changed that night. I did not cry, I did not break down. I did not demand explanations. I just felt a different kind of calm, as if my heart understood that it was time to let go. When I left the house that morning, I only had a bag with a few things. My coat, the handkerchief from her wedding, a photograph of the two of us at the beach, and a notebook. That notebook was my confessional, my refuge. On its pages, I had written for years everything I could not tell her. The letters I never sent, the apologies I never received, the memories that kept me alive. As I walked down the empty street, I thought about returning to my roots, to the hometown where I was born, to my parents' old house, where the smell of the countryside and the ghosts of my childhood still lingered. Maybe there I could think clearly. Maybe there I could decide if my note would be a goodbye, or the beginning of something else. Why? Although no one knew it, that note I left in front of her door was not just a piece of paper. It was not a farewell. It was a key that would unlock the doors of her conscience, even if it had to be forced. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air burn my lungs, and I knew that the past cannot be erased, but it can be rewritten, and I was about to do just that. Sometimes a simple piece of paper can weigh more than a stone. That morning, as the sun barely touched the rooftops, I left my plate and my note in front of Lauren's door. No one saw me leave. No one heard the sound of my footsteps on the cold floor. Only I knew what that gesture meant. It was not a farewell, it was a seed of guilt, of reflection, or of fear. Hours later, as I walked towards the bus station, Lauren was waking up with a frown, annoyed that her husband had left the bedroom window open. She did not know that the real cold was waiting for her on the other side of the door. "What is this?" she said in a sleepy voice, seeing the empty plate on the floor. "Mom?" The plate, the same one she had seen in my hands the night before, was spotlessly clean, gleaming, and on it rested a sheet of paper folded in four. The paper had a coffee-stained corner, as if it had been torn from an old notebook. Her husband, still in bed, muttered, "Another one of your scenes, Lauren?" She did not answer. Her eyes were fixed on that note, on that piece of the past she did not expect to find there. Something inside told her she should not read it, but she did. The first lines were written in my shaky handwriting. "Not all deaths happen when the heart stops. Some happen in silence, while someone we love looks at us with contempt. Last night I died a little, my daughter, but before I disappear completely, I want you to remember one thing. Whoever forgets their mother, forgets themselves." Lauren dropped the paper as if it burned. She put a hand to her chest. Her breathing quickened. "What does this mean?" she whispered. Her husband got up, took the note, and read it quietly. "She must be exaggerating. Your mother is dramatic, you know." But she was not listening to him. The plate, so clean, so precisely placed in front of her door, had something symbolic, disturbing about it. She remembered the dinner, my silences, my calm gaze as she hurt me with her words. For the first time, she felt ashamed. She left the plate on the dining room table. The house smelled of reheated turkey and wilted flowers. There was no music, no joy, just the echo of my absent footsteps. She went to my room, perhaps to make sure I was still there, but opening the door, she felt an emptiness that hit her like a slap. The bed was made, the closet almost empty, the mirror covered with a cloth. There were no notes, no suitcases, no signs of where I had gone, only the dense air of abandonment. "Mom," she whispered. It was the first time in years she had said that word with a trembling voice. She picked up the note again and read it, more carefully this time. At the bottom, in smaller letters, was a second sentence. When someone cleans a plate, it is not always to eat from it again. Sometimes it is to leave it ready, for someone who truly deserves it. Lauren felt a chill. She did not fully understand the message, but there was something in those words that gave her an unbearable sense of loss. She ran to the phone, dialed my number, but the call went straight to voicemail. My recorded voice, that voice she no longer remembered as sweet, said, "Hi, this is Elizabeth. If it's important, leave a message. If it's not, the silence will be enough." Lauren hung up. Her hands were shaking. Her husband, irritated, said, "She probably went to visit a friend or went to her hometown. I always told you that you needed to set boundaries." She did not answer. For the first time, she did not want to listen to him. Something inside her was stirring, a mixture of guilt and fear. That note was more than a goodbye. It was a warning. She could not concentrate all day. The plate remained on the table, untouched. At noon she tried to eat, but could not take a bite. Every so often she looked towards the door, expecting to hear my footsteps, but she only heard the ticking of the clock, slow, relentless. In the afternoon, she took the car and drove to some places I used to go. The neighborhood church, the market, the square. No one had seen me. When she returned home, at night, exhaustion fell on her like a stone. She went up to her son's room and watched him sleep. He had the same peace she had lost years ago. She drew closer, stroked his hair, and felt tears welling up. "I do not want to become what she was," she whispered, not knowing that she already had. She went downstairs, lit a candle, and read the note again, but this time something changed. On the back of the paper, which she had not seen before, there was a stain that looked like runny ink. She turned it over and found one last line, almost invisible, written in my fine, careful handwriting. "When you open your eyes and do not find me, you will understand what it is to be alone in your own house." The candle flickered. Lauren felt a lump in her throat. "My God, what have I done?" she said, sobbing. She did not sleep that night. She walked through the house in silence, looking at my photos, touching the objects that belonged to me. Everything she had despised suddenly became valuable. The coat she criticized me for being old, the perfume she said smelled of the past, the cups she swore to throw away when I died. Everything transformed into relics of something she might never recover. The next morning, she went to the police station to report me missing. But when she mentioned my age and my state of mind, the officer just told her, "Older people sometimes leave of their own free will. If there are no signs of violence, it is best to wait 48 hours. She left there with an empty soul. Wait. That is what she had to do. But how do you wait when you do not know if the person you love is still alive? How do you wait knowing that maybe you do not deserve for them to come back? Back home, the plate was still there, on the table, shining like a mirror. In its reflection, Lauren saw her own tired, aged, dull face, and she understood for the first time what I had meant. She was dying too. She just did not know it yet. The silence of the house was unbearable. Then she opened the window, breathed in the cold air, and felt something new. Fear. A different, deep-seated fear, not coming from the outside, but from within. Fear of herself, of her words, of her story. And as the Christmas lights continued to twinkle on the street, she understood that this note was just the beginning. The real message had not yet been revealed. The sound of the bus engine seemed like a distant roar, as if the city were pushing me out of its tired body. I sat by the window, watching the streets fade away behind me. No one saw me off. No one asked where I was going. And for the first time in a long time, that loneliness did not hurt me. It freed me. I had a small suitcase, a thick coat, my notebook, and a sealed envelope that I did not know when I would deliver. The early morning air smelled of distance. As the bus pulled away, my thoughts returned again and again to the note I left on the plate. Not out of guilt, but out of certainty. I knew she would read it. I knew those words would not leave her mind easily, and although it was not my intention to hurt her, I also knew that pain was, sometimes, the only way to teach. The journey was long, almost 5 hours to my hometown. Everything was as I remembered: the cobblestone streets, the houses with red roofs, the smell of fresh bread coming from the old Johnson's bakery. But everything seemed smaller, quieter, maybe because I was no longer the same. I stayed in my parents' old house, abandoned for years. The walls were covered in dust, the windows broken, and the family photographs were still there, yellowed, as if time had refused to erase them. Upon entering, I felt a pang in my chest. Not of sadness, but of destiny. I had returned to the starting point, to the place where it all began. I lit a candle and walked through the empty rooms. Every corner held a memory. Here I learned to sew. There my mother taught me to pray. And in that corner, my father told me the only sentence I never forgot: whoever does not respect themselves becomes the shadow of others. Back then, I did not understand his words. Now I did. Meanwhile, in the city, Lauren was starting to lose control. I found out later, from neighbors who called me. They told me she had gone from house to house, asking if anyone had seen me, her eyes red and her hair disheveled, that she was not sleeping, that she barely ate, that she kept repeating over and over. My mother would not do this. She would not leave without warning, and they were right. I did not leave without warning. I left her a warning. She just did not understand it yet. The days passed. In my hometown, my life settled into a routine. Cleaning, cooking, writing in my notebook. I wrote a lot about my childhood, about Lauren, about the times I stayed silent for love. But I also wrote about justice, about how a mother can regain her dignity without raising her voice. It was my way of healing, of ordering the chaos. One afternoon, I found a wooden box under a loose floorboard. Inside were old documents, letters from my parents, property deeds, and a will. My hands trembled as I read it. That house, and a small bank account I thought was empty, belonged to me. My father had left everything in my name. I never knew. I never claimed it. Suddenly I understood that fate had brought me here for a reason, not just to escape, but to prepare. I began to plan calmly. Every night I wrote a new letter. Some were for Lauren, others for my grandson. In them there were no insults or reproaches, only truths. Confessions I never dared to tell her face to face. And one of those letters was special, the one that would change everything. Meanwhile, in the city, Lauren was beginning to feel watched. They told me about it later, in low voices, as if fearing something supernatural had occurred. She said she heard my footsteps at night, my voice calling her from the hallway. She dreamed of me, always holding the empty plate. She would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, swearing that I was there, at the foot of her bed, watching her without saying a word. Her husband began to worry. Not about me, of course, but about the embarrassment. "They're going to think you're crazy," he told her, but she did not listen. In her eyes, something began to grow that she had never known: remorse. Because when a daughter offends her mother, she can run, she can justify herself, she can invent 1,000 excuses, but guilt always finds its way back. In my hometown, I continued my days serenely. I got up early, opened the windows, let in the fresh country air. Sometimes the neighbors came to see me, curious. They asked if I planned to stay, if I was expecting visitors. I just smiled. I owed them no explanations. One night, while writing by candlelight, I felt something that shook me. A presence. It was not fear, but intuition. Something told me the story was not over, that Lauren would come, that sooner or later repentance would push her to me. And when that happened, I would be ready. I left the notebook on the table and looked out the window. The sky was covered in stars. I thought of my grandson, of his innocent smile, of how much he looked like me at his age. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe my legacy should not be just pain. But before healing, I had to close the wound his mother had left. And so the days passed. Each dawn brought a new calm. Until, one morning, a car stopped in front of my house. I recognized the silhouette before I saw it clearly. Lauren, my daughter, had arrived. I did not go down immediately. I watched her from the window. Her face was gaunt, her hands trembling, her eyes red. She was carrying something in her hands, my old embroidered handkerchief, the one she never allowed me to give her on her wedding day. Her steps were slow, as if she were carrying an invisible cross. She knocked on the door 3 times and waited. I took a deep breath. I knew this moment would come, and with it, the beginning of the end. It was not the reunion of a mother and her daughter. It was the judgment of a woman who had finally learned not to apologize for existing. The door creaked as Lauren pushed it open, and the smell of dampness and old wood enveloped her immediately. She entered cautiously, looking around as if stepping on sacred ground. The afternoon sun filtered through the cracks in the windows, illuminating dust particles that floated like suspended memories. "Mom," she whispered, but no one answered. She moved forward slowly, fearing each step would stir up ghosts. The walls were covered with old photographs, some crooked, others lovingly framed. There was my young face, in a blue dress, holding a 4-year-old Lauren. We were smiling. It was a real smile, before time erased it all. Lauren touched the glass with her fingertips, and a tear fell onto the image. At that exact moment, I was watching her from the upstairs window. I had not expected her so soon. I figured it would take her days to gather the courage to look for me, but there she was, tired, broken, her arrogance transformed into remorse. I did not go down. I wanted to see her walk through the house, feel its weight, confront the memories she had despised so much. Lauren continued down the hallway. Each room seemed frozen in time. The kitchen with its old plates, the rocking chair by the window, the embroidered tablecloth I only used for visitors. Everything felt familiar, and, at the same time, strange. When she reached the master bedroom, she stopped. On the bed, a worn notebook waited for her, open to the middle. She picked it up with trembling hands. The first page began with my firm, steady handwriting. "If you are reading this, Lauren, it is because you finally dared to look back. I do not know if you are doing it out of love, guilt, or simple curiosity, but it matters little. Everything you are about to read here is what you never heard me say." Lauren swallowed hard. The following pages were filled with my words, my most intimate thoughts, written over years. She turned the pages slowly, reading fragments, as if each sentence struck her directly in the chest. "There is no greater pain than raising someone who one day stops seeing you as a mother and starts seeing you as a burden. They told me that children learn over time, but they did not warn me that some daughters only understand when it is already too late. I have forgiven 1,000 times without being asked, but forgiveness without repentance is like sowing in dry earth." Lauren sat on the edge of the bed. Her eyes could no longer hold back the tears. There were crossed-out sentences, others written in anger, but one in particular left her breathless. "This house is not just a refuge, it is my witness. Here I keep what will one day change the course of everything that was taken from me." She closed the diary shut. She looked around, searching for any sign of what those words meant, and that is when she saw it, a small wooden box under the nightstand, covered by a white cloth. She took it out carefully. It had a rusty lock and an engraved inscription, "Only open when you understand." Lauren looked for a key, but could not find one. She looked at the diary again, and noticed something strange. A red ribbon stuck out from the final pages. She pulled it and discovered a letter sealed with wax. On the envelope, her full name, Lauren Gutierrez Ortega. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a sheet of blue ink, dated a week ago. "Daughter, do not be afraid if reading this makes you feel short of breath. Repentance is the first sign of life. This box holds the truth you never wanted to see. What you judged as weakness was my way of protecting you. Not everything I gave you was visible, but every sacrifice left a mark. If you decide to open it, you will know what you truly inherited from me. My strength, and my decision to no longer be silent." Lauren dropped the letter. Her breathing became heavy, as if the air in the house had thickened. She got up and opened the curtains. Outside, the wind rustled the trees and the sky was beginning to cloud over. She opened the drawers, looking for the key. In the third one, she found a small metal crucifix, and on its base, engraved in tiny letters, the word "beneath." She lifted the drawer's lining, and there, taped with old tape, was the key. Her heart was pounding. She put the key in the lock, turned it, and the click echoed like thunder. Inside the box were several things: a photo of me with an unknown man, my smiling face, my hand held in his, legal documents, and a bank book. In the corner, an envelope with a logo Lauren recognized immediately. A law firm. She picked up the photo first. She looked at me. Young, happy, different. On the back of the image, a handwritten sentence: "Your real father loved you until the end." Lauren felt the floor move. "What does this mean?" she whispered, her lips trembling. She shuffled through the rest of the papers, among them, a will. Her name appeared there, but so did another. The man from the photo. The date was recent. And at the end of the document, in firm letters: "The inheritance passes to Elizabeth Gutierrez, who will decide the fate of the assets upon her death. In the event Elizabeth does not claim it, it will pass to her direct descendant, Lauren Gutierrez." Lauren sank to the floor. Her whole body was shaking. The woman she had despised her entire life had not only been stronger than she imagined, but had kept a secret that changed her history. My silence, she understood then, was not weakness. It was power. I, from the staircase, watched in silence, unseen. I watched her read, cry, touch the pages of the diary with devotion. I watched her break, and although my eyes also filled with tears, I did not go down, not yet. I wanted her to understand, on her own, who her mother was. Lauren hugged the diary to her chest. For the first time in many years, she said my name with tenderness. "Mom, if you are here, forgive me." The wind slipped through the open window, moving the curtains as if someone were caressing her face, and she swore she heard my voice, soft, from somewhere in the room. "It is not too late, child." But truths, when they arrive, no longer wait. The wind was blowing hard that morning. Lauren had not slept. She had been sitting on the floor for hours, surrounded by papers, photos, and open letters. The candle she had lit at dawn had burned down to the end, leaving a trail of dry wax on the table. Her eyes were swollen, her hair a mess, her breath short. Everything she thought she knew about her life had collapsed in one night. The sound of a car engine startled her. She looked out the window. A black sedan had stopped in front of the house. A man in a suit got out, holding a leather briefcase. He wore a hat and dark glasses, despite the cloudy morning. He walked briskly to the door and knocked 3 times. Lauren hesitated to open it, but something inside her, a mixture of fear and a need for answers, forced her to. "Mrs. Lauren Gutierrez Ortega?" the man asked, in a measured voice. "Yes, that's me." "Who are you?" "My name is Alexander Munoz. I'm an attorney. I am here on behalf of your mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Gutierrez." Lauren turned pale. "My mother?" she whispered. "Where is she? Is she alive?" The man watched her for a moment, as if gauging her emotions, and then nodded. "She is fine, but she asked me to deliver this to you personally." He opened his briefcase and took out a large envelope, sealed with a blue seal. "Your mother was very clear with the instructions. She said no one else should open it but you." Lauren took the envelope with trembling hands. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and added, "She also requested that, if you wanted answers, I should stay while you read it." She broke the seal and unfolded the papers. The first document was a will, dated recently. The heading read, "Last Will and Testament of Elizabeth Gutierrez." Her eyes scanned the lines quickly. With each sentence, her breathing grew heavier. "I, Elizabeth Gutierrez, being of sound mind, declare that my material assets, including the property located in my hometown, the bank accounts inherited from my parents, and the savings accumulated during my life, will be placed in an educational trust fund in the name of my grandson, Matthew Ortega Gutierrez. Under no circumstances shall said assets pass to my daughter, Lauren Gutierrez, until she has demonstrated, to the same lawyer delivering this letter, that she has dedicated at least 1 full year to the care and companionship of her own son, and to volunteering with elderly individuals in conditions of abandonment." Lauren dropped the paper. "No, it cannot be," she said quietly. "Is she punishing me?" The lawyer remained silent. There were more documents. Copies of accounts, property titles, even a recent deposit in the grandson's name. Everything was notarized, and at the end, a handwritten letter, folded in 4, in my clear handwriting. Lauren opened it, her heart pounding in her chest. "My daughter, if this letter reaches your hands, it means you already know who your real father was. I did not tell you before because I wanted you to find out when you were ready to understand that love is not measured by blood but by actions. I know you judged me, I know you hurt me, But I also know that inside you, the little girl who ran to hug me when she was scared still remains. That girl did not die, Lauren. She just hid behind pride. Everything I own, even what I never claimed, I leave to my grandson. Not as a punishment for you, but as a warning. Life is not inherited. It is built. If you truly wish to reclaim what you think belongs to you, start by returning what you took: respect, tenderness, gratitude. When you are able to love without expecting anything, that will be your true inheritance. And when you see an empty plate, remember that it is not always a symbol of hunger. Sometimes, it is a reminder of all that is given without receiving anything in return. Lauren clutched the letter to her chest and broke down crying. Not a weak cry, but a deep sob, the kind that comes from the soul. The lawyer watched her in silence until she raised her gaze. "Where is she?" she asked through her tears. "Please, I need to see her." Alexander took a deep breath before answering. "She is here, in town, but she asked me not to let you look for her until you finished reading this letter and gave you this." He took out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Lauren opened it. Inside was a plate. My plate. The same one from Christmas dinner. The same one I left the note on. At the bottom of the plate, etched with a sharp tool, were crooked, firm words. "Love that is scorned is a dish best served cold." Lauren held it in her hands, crying uncontrollably. "Oh God," she babbled, "I do not know how to ask her for forgiveness." The lawyer closed his briefcase. "Sometimes, madam, forgiveness is not asked for, it is demonstrated." With that, he left without looking back. Lauren was left alone, with the plate in her hands, the letter on the table, and the sound of the wind seeping through the cracks. She felt small, vulnerable, and for the first time, truly a daughter. She went out into the yard. She looked towards the hills and screamed my name. Her voice was lost among the trees. And I, from a distance, heard her. I was standing by the old dirt road that leads to the mill, watching her, my soul torn between pain and tenderness. Now, I thought, now she is beginning to understand. Because my revenge was never about taking anything from her. It was about forcing her to see. The sunrise arrived wrapped in a soft mist that covered the town's hills. The air smelled of damp earth and burnt wood. I had spent the night awake, with a candle lit and my notebook on the table, without writing a single word. Something inside me told me this day would not be like the others. That the story I had tried to bury was finally coming towards me, walking with trembling, repentant steps. When I heard a car engine stop in front of the house, I knew it was her. My heart skipped a beat, but not from fear, from destiny. I peeked through the window, and there was Lauren, getting out of the car with red eyes, a tired face, and a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. She walked slowly, with the insecurity that only someone carrying the weight of guilt has. She was wearing the same coat she wore as a teenager, the one I had sewn for her when we had little money. She had kept it for years, and seeing her in it shook me. It was as if, somehow, the past was returning to ask for one last chance. She knocked on the door 3 times, timidly, as if afraid to wake the memories sleeping within those walls. "Mom," her voice was barely a whisper. "Are you there?" It took me a few seconds to answer. Not because I hesitated to open, but because I needed to make sure I was not doing it from the wound, but from the truth. I stood up, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The first second was pure silence. We just looked at each other, both motionless, measuring the distance that had separated us for years. She was trembling. I was not. "I thought you were dead," she finally said, her voice thin. "I did die," I replied, "but not in body. I died the night you stopped seeing me as your mother." Her eyes filled with tears and, without a word, she lunged at me and hugged me. Her body broke against mine, and I felt her hot tears on my neck. For a moment, I wanted to push her away, but I could not. After so much time, that hug was the echo of something we had both lost, the innocence of loving unconditionally. "Forgive me," she murmured. I did not know what I was saying. I did not know what I was doing. "Yes, you did," I replied calmly, stroking her hair. "You just did not want to listen. Pride makes you deaf." We stayed like that for a long time, not speaking. Outside, the wind made the leaves dance, and inside, only her ragged breathing could be heard. When she pulled away, I noticed her hands were stained with dust, as if she had been digging in the past. "I read your diary," she finally said, lowering her gaze. "And the letter. I found out about the will and the lawyer." "Then you know none of this was an accident," I replied. "Every word, every gesture, every silence had a purpose." Lauren nodded slowly. "Yes, I understand. But what hurts the most is not what you stopped telling me, but everything I forced you to keep silent." She paused. "I discovered things I never imagined. Your strength, your sacrifices, your fears, and I am ashamed for being so blind." "Sometimes daughters need to lose everything to see what they had," I said softly. "Do not blame yourself more than necessary. Just make sure you do not repeat the story." Lauren took a deep breath and looked at me intently. "Why did you do it like this, Mom? Why disappear, leave me that note, have the lawyer come?" I could have assumed the worst. I smiled sadly. "Because if I spoke to you, you would not listen. If I yelled at you, you would defend yourself. But if I gave you silence, the echo would haunt you until it forced you to think." And it did. She fell silent, understanding. Then she took something out of her bag. The plate. My plate. She held it in her hands with a respect she had never had for anything before. "I brought it with me," she said. "I could not leave it. I do not know why, but I feel like this plate speaks to me." I looked at it. The rim still had a faint mark, a small crack that formed years ago. "That plate represents what love endures without breaking," I told her. "Not everything that cracks is no longer useful. Sometimes the cracks are proof that we resisted." Lauren stroked the rim with her fingers and nodded. "I've thought a lot about what you said in your letter, that I had to learn to care to deserve what I thought was mine. I already spoke to the lawyer. I'm going to start volunteering at the nursing home in town." "Are you really going to?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Yes," her eyes moistened. "I want to, not for the inheritance but for you, for what I denied you." I looked at her for a long time. There was something different in her face. Humility, the kind of light that is only born from true repentance. Then I said, "Perhaps there is still hope." We sat on the rocking chair on the porch. The sun began to peek through the clouds, painting the sky in golden hues. The wind carried the smell of earth and bread. Lauren rested her head on my shoulder, like she used to as a child. "You know," I said finally, "for years I thought my mission was to teach you to be strong. But I was wrong. My mission was to teach you not to forget." "Forget what?" she asked. "That life, daughter, is paid for with love or with loneliness. You chose loneliness for a while, but you can still pay with love." She nodded, crying silently. We stayed like that, watching the sun break through the clouds, in a silence that no longer hurt. It was a silence full of redemption, of peace. For the first time in many years, I felt I could breathe without fear of losing her. "Mom," Lauren whispered, closing her eyes, "if I could go back, I would do everything differently." "You do not have to go back," I told her. "You just have to start over." And as the day was born around us, I understood that my revenge had served its purpose. It was not punishment. It was a mirror. I did not make her suffer. I made her see. And seeing her awaken was worth more than any apology. I stroked her hair and smiled. "Welcome home, Lauren." Several weeks had passed since that morning. Lauren returned to my life. The town had seen us walking together through the dusty streets, like two shadows that time refused to erase. At first, people murmured, curious, "Is it true the daughter came back?" They say the old woman disinherited her and still forgave her, but as the days went by, the stares stopped weighing on us. Routine wrapped us like a warm blanket, and little by little, silence became companionship. Lauren had stayed with me in the house. She slept in her old room, the one where the painted sunflowers still hung on the wall, half faded by the years. Every morning she made me coffee and went out to sweep the patio. I watched her from the window, her hair tied back, her expression serene. She was no longer the haughty woman who had humiliated me that Christmas night. She was someone else, a more human version, broken but alive. I did not ask her for explanations. Words are unnecessary when the soul already understands. But I watched her in silence, seeing how, bit by bit, repentance transformed into purpose. She spoke less, listened more. Sometimes, when she thought I was not looking, she would leave fresh flowers by my parents' portrait, small gestures, small redemptions. One day I found her crying over the plate. Yes, over that plate. She was at the table, her head resting on her arms, her tears falling onto the rim. I stood still, saying nothing. "I cannot stop thinking about what I did to you, Mom," she murmured, without looking up. "I do not know how to keep living knowing I hurt you so much." "By living," I replied softly. "By living differently." She dried her eyes, took a deep breath, and nodded. Sometimes the simplest answers are the ones that weigh the most. That afternoon, she asked me to walk her to the town's nursing home. She had started volunteering there. She told me about it timidly, like someone who does not dare to believe they deserve a new beginning. "It is not easy," she told me as we walked. At first it was hard to look them in the eyes. I thought they were all like you, lonely, forgotten, waiting for a visit that never comes. But when I listened to them talk, I realized that everyone has a story, and almost all of them start the same way. "My children do not visit anymore." Her words pierced me. "And what do you do when they tell you that?" I asked. "I hold their hand," she replied, "and I stay silent, because I know there are no words to heal that." We were quiet for the rest of the walk. When we arrived, the elderly residents greeted us with shy smiles. Some were embroidering, others playing cards. Lauren approached a white-haired woman who was knitting with trembling hands. "Mrs. Mercedes," she said, "I brought someone I want you to meet. This is my mother." The old woman looked up and smiled sweetly at me. "So you are the mother who teaches with her soul," she said. "Your daughter talks a lot about you." I was speechless. It was the first time anyone had called me that, the mother who teaches with her soul. Over the next few days, Lauren continued to work there. I saw her come back tired, but with different eyes, cleaner. And every night, before bed, she would tell me a story about a grandmother waiting for letters, about an old man who cried when he heard a song, about a woman who knitted names she no longer remembered. "Now I understand," she told me one night, sitting next to me on the porch. "I understand what you felt when you took care of me without receiving anything in return. It's a love that hurts, but it never stops giving." I smiled. That is being a mother, daughter, giving even if the plate remains empty. The months passed, and winter arrived. The cold seeped through the cracks, and firewood was scarce. My hands began to tremble. My steps became slower. I knew. My body was beginning to say goodbye. Not in a hurry, but with the serenity that comes from a duty fulfilled. One night, while Lauren was reading in the living room, I called her. "Come, daughter." She put down the book and came immediately. "What is it, Mom? Are you feeling sick?" I shook my head and pointed to the table. I had prepared something. 2 plates, 2 spoons, and a pot of steaming soup. "I want to have dinner with you. Like that night, but different." Lauren sat across from me. I served the soup slowly, careful not to spill a drop. "Do you know what I've learned, Mom?" she said, looking me in the eyes. That the empty plate was not revenge. It was an invitation. I nodded, emotional. "Yes, daughter." It was an invitation to see, to understand, to remember that plates get washed, but the soul, you have to know how to fill it. We ate in silence for a few minutes. It was raining outside. The sound of the water hitting the roof was like an old song. Suddenly, Lauren took my hand. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for teaching me without shouting. Thank you for waiting for me, even when I did not deserve it." "Do not thank me," I told her. "Love is not thanked, it is cared for." She stood up, walked around the table, and hugged me. I closed my eyes. I felt her warmth, her breath on my neck, her racing heart. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, daughter. And even if time takes me, that love will stay here." I pointed to the plate, "In what you gave, and in what you learned to receive." The following weeks were quiet. Lauren continued to care for me with a devotion I had never known. She read me stories, covered my feet, and combed my hair with the same tenderness I used to when she was a child. Every gesture she made was a word she did not need to speak. One afternoon, while she was sleeping in the chair by my bed, I wrote my last letter. "Daughter, if you read this one day and I am gone, do not cry. You were not born to mourn, but to live. I never wanted my plate to hurt you. I wanted it to wake you up. Today, I no longer need anything, because what I truly wanted was not your repentance, but to see you love again. If you achieve that, I will have won the true inheritance and your clean heart." I left the letter inside the plate, covering it with a white handkerchief, and I slept. The day I departed, the dawn was serene. Lauren found me with a peaceful face, my hands clasped over my chest. There were no tears at first, just silence. A silence so deep it seemed to contain all the words we did not say. Days later, at the funeral, the townspeople filled the small church. Lauren spoke in front of everyone, her voice firm but sweet. "My mother taught me that an empty plate can weigh more than a stone, that you do not need to shout to teach, that sometimes a mother is silent, so her daughter can hear her own heart." At the end, she took out the plate wrapped in the handkerchief, placed it on the casket, and said, "This plate was my punishment, my lesson, and my redemption. I return it." Full of what she taught me. "Love," she cried. But it was a serene cry, one of closure, not guilt. Years passed. Lauren continued to work at the nursing home. Every Christmas she organized a dinner for everyone, and in the center of the table she always placed an empty plate. When someone asked her why, she would reply with a smile, "Because this plate represents those who gave everything and left in silence, and also those of us who still have something to learn." The wind kept blowing in the hometown, the bells kept ringing, and the story of Elizabeth Gutierrez became a local legend. They said her house always smelled of freshly made soup, even when empty. That at night, if you got close to the window, you could hear a soft voice saying, "Fill your plate, child. Fill it before time takes it away." And so, generation after generation, that plate continued to serve its lesson, because there are loves that do not die, they simply transform into memory. And there are mothers who, even from silence, continue to teach us how to live. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are not healed by time, but by forgiveness. Elizabeth and Lauren teach us that it is never too late to love again, even after the silence. Tell us in the comments what city you are watching us from. Give it a like if this story touched your heart. And subscribe to Grandma's Diary to continue joining us for more stories full of emotion, reflection, and life.